The shriek sliced through the afternoon din of the city, sharp and sudden. Before Shen-in could even register its source, her sister, Shen-ching, was a blur of motion. A wiry man clutching a designer handbag dodged through the pedestrian traffic, and Shen-ching, with the explosive energy of a sprinter off the blocks, was already on his heels. Shen-in sighed, adjusting the heavy tote bag on her own shoulder. This was classic Shen-ching. Act first, think never. The bag belonged to a woman standing beside a man who seemed utterly unmoved by the chaos. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that likely cost more than their apartment's annual rent, and his expression was one of profound boredom. He watched the chase with the detached air of someone observing a mildly inconvenient street performance. As the woman beside him fretted, he simply straightened his tie, his gaze cold and impenetrable. Minutes later, Shen-ching returned, chest heaving but grinning triumphantly. The stolen bag held aloft like a trophy. She presented it to the stunned woman, who stammered her thanks. The man, however, merely gave Shen-ching a glacial once-over. "My sister got your bag back," Shannon stated, her tone flat as she stepped forward. A simple, the click of Susan's designer heels on the polished concrete floor was a declaration of war. She swept past the reception desk, a storm of perfume and entitlement, making a direct line for the glass-walled sanctum out of the hall. Xiao Tianyu's assistant, Ma Yang, materialized in her path, his body language a masterclass in polite obstruction. "Miss by Mr. Xiao is in a meeting," he stated, his voice as neutral as his expression. Susan scoffed, adjusting the strap of her crocodile leather handbag. "His meeting is with me. I'm his fiancée. Now move." She tried to shoulder past him, but Ma Yang was an immovable object in a perfectly tailored suit. The door to the office slid open. Xiao Tianyu stood in the frame, his posture exuding an arctic calm that made the air in the hallway drop several degrees. He didn't even glance at Susan, his eyes fixed on his assistant. "Ma Yang, is there a problem? Mr. Xiao, Miss Bai insists." "I don't care what she insists," Tianyu cut in, his voice dangerously low. He finally turned his gaze to Susan, his eyes devoid of any warmth. "This is my company, not a stage for your dramatics. You are not my fiancé. You will never be my fiancé. Ma Yang, see Miss Bai out. If she refuses, call security." Humiliation burned bright red on Susan's cheeks. The hushed whispers from the open-plan workspace were like 1,000 tiny needles. "Tianyu, you can't do this to me. Your family can call my father," he said, turning his back on her. "I'm busy." The glass door slid shut, encasing him once more in silent, imposing isolation. Susan stood frozen for a moment before Ma Yang gave a slight, almost imperceptible cough. Defeated, she spun on her heel and marched away, her sharp clicks now sounding less like a war cry and more like a retreat. That evening, the weight of his family name settled upon Xiao Tianyu like a shroud. He sat at the long, imposing mahogany table in his father's mansion, the scent of old money and unspoken obligations thick in the air. His father, Xiao Jianhong, cleared his throat, setting down his chopsticks with deliberate precision. "Susan's father called me today," he began, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. He was concerned. "Tianyu didn't look up from his bowl. She caused a scene at my office. I handled it by humiliating the daughter of our largest private shareholder," Xiao Jianhong countered. "Tianyu, this isn't a game. A merger of our families through marriage would solidify Vissen's position for the next decade. Matched shareholdings create stability." Frustration simmered in Tianyu's chest. "I built Vision with my own code and my own team, not with matched shareholdings. Business isn't done in drawing rooms anymore, father. It's done with innovation and capital," his father finished coolly. Do not mistake your success for true independence. You are a Chiao. That comes with responsibilities. Tianyu fell silent, the argument dying on his lips. He could win any business negotiation, crush any corporate rival, but against the gilded bars of this cage, he was powerless. He felt the familiar, suffocating pressure of a future that had been written for him long before he was born. A life of strategic alliances where love was a liability and freedom was an illusion. Days later, the tension of that dinner was a distant memory, replaced by the electric buzz of triumph. Chiao Tianyu stood backstage, watching the enormous screens in the press conference hall display the stunningly rendered landscapes of Rome the world. The game was his masterpiece, Vicen's crown jewel, and today was its first anniversary celebration. The hall was packed with journalists, influencers, and industry analysts, all broadcasting live. He straightened his tie, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. He walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, taking his place at the podium. 1 year ago, we invited you to roam the world, you began, his voice confident and resonant. Today, we want to show you the new worlds we're building suddenly. The main screen behind him flickered. The majestic, soaring dragon from the game's loading sequence dissolved into a mess of corrupted pixels. A cascade of green, nonsensical code filled the screen, followed by a stark, mocking message in bold red letters. Your world is built on lies. A collective gasp swept through the hall. The celebratory music cut out, replaced by a frantic symphony of camera shutters and shouted questions. Tianyu's smile vanished, his face hardening into a mask of cold fury. On the front lines, his technical team scrambled, their faces pale with panic. This wasn't a glitch, this was a sophisticated public execution. Amidst the chaos, a journalist in the third row, Shannon, remained unnervingly still. She had come here chasing a rumor about data vulnerabilities, a tip from a disgruntled ex-employee. She had expected to ask some tough questions, not witness a corporate implosion. Her gaze was fixed on the stage, not on the Pane CEO, but on a man rushing from the wings Song Shutao, the game's legendary producer, and Tianyu's right hand. He looked distraught, clutching his phone and shouting at his staff. As security tried to control the frantic media, a different kind of commotion erupted near the exit. A woman screamed. Shen Nern's journalistic instincts took over, and she pushed through the crowd just in time to see paramedics surrounding a figure on the floor. It was Song Shutao. He was utterly still, his face a ghastly shade of grey. The rest of the evening was a blur of flashing lights, first from cameras, then from an ambulance. By the time Chiao Tianyu arrived at the hospital, it was too late. The official report spread like wildfire through the shell-shocked company and the ravenous media. Song Shutao, 45, had died of a sudden, massive heart attack, likely induced by the stress of the event, in his now silent office. The taunting message from the hack still burned behind Tianyu's eyes. The loss was a physical blow, leaving him hollowed out. Shutao wasn't just his technical director. He was his mentor, the one person who understood his vision. Across the city, Shannon sat at a desk, staring at the screen. The official news reports were all saying the same thing. Tragic coincidence. A high-stress job, a shocking public failure, a weak heart. It was a neat, simple narrative, but her gut told her it was wrong. A top-tier game hacked with impossible ease on its biggest day. Its celebrated producer, the man who'd know exactly how and why it happened, dead within minutes. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a cover-up. A cold certainty settled over her. This wasn't just a story about a corporate crisis anymore. It was about a death, and she was going to find out the truth. The air in Vicen's R&D department was a sterile, refrigerated silence, a stark contrast to the creative chaos that had once defined it. Now, it was a tomb and its pharaoh, Song Shutao was gone. Chia Tianyu stood by the glass wall of his mentor's office, his own reflection a ghostly imposition over the empty chair within. He saw not a CEO, but a man adrift in a sea of his own creation. His father's words from the night before echoed in his mind, as sharp and cold as the glass under his fingertips. Everyone at Vision is a grasshopper on the same rope. Tianyu, the old chairman, had rasped over the phone. Song Shutao was a brilliant mind, but a flawed leader. His sentimentality was a liability. Now the rope is fraying. A pause, thick with implication. That student of his, Ding Jun. He's a sharp knife. Sometimes, you need a knife, not a paintbrush. A knife. The word twisted into your news cut. He turned his gaze toward the open plan workspace where Ding Jun was directing the frantic code auditors. From a distance, he projected an image of control and solemn duty. But Tianyu had seen more. He remembered a flash of a memory from just a week before the system-wide crash, a scene glimpsed through this very window. Song Shutao, red-faced and trembling, his voice a muffled roar of fury. Facing him was Ding Jun, calm and unyielding, his posture steady in defiant ambition. This isn't a game. It's a Skinner box, Song had yelled, morally bankrupt. Ding Chun's reply had been inaudible, but his smirk was not. Now, that same man wore a mask of professional grief, but his eyes, when they swept across the room, held no sorrow. They held only calculation. During the emergency board meeting, while others spoke of honoring Song Shutao's memory, Ding Jun had coolly presented a three-phase plan to overhaul the game's core mechanics. When a junior developer mentioned preserving his teacher's vision, Ding Chun's response was chilling. Teacher Song's vision was a beautiful starting point, he'd said, his voice smooth as polished stone. But roam the world was just the beginning. I will build a world that makes his legacy obsolete. A word hung in the air, an epitaph written by a predator. Tianyu's suspicion hardened into a cold certainty. This was not just ambition. This was a coup, miles away, in a cramped, cluttered internet cafe that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Shannon was chasing a different kind of ghost. The name was Han Xiaodong, a 19-year-old boy who had driven his father's sedan head-on into a highway median. His last words, screamed at the paramedics, were about a golden flying tiger. He was a good boy, Han Xiaodong's mother wept, her voice cracking over Shen as recorder. But that game, it consumed him. He'd stay up for days, spending money he didn't have. He said he was so close to catching it. The tiger. He said it would make him a god in the game. Shenna's blood ran cold. She spent the next 48 hours buried in online forums and game wikis. A digital archaeologist unearthing a toxic civilization. Roam the World wasn't just a game. It was a masterfully engineered addiction machine. The golden flying tiger was a legendary creature with a spawn rate of less than 0.01%, but its appearance could be triggered more frequently with the purchase of expensive celestial ores. It was a system built on predatory monetization, a digital treadmill designed to exhaust players until they paid for a moment of relief. A moment of power, her journalist's instincts screamed. This wasn't just a story about a corporate crisis. It was a story about a human one. That night, a skeletal figure in a hooded sweatshirt slipped into a grimy, rain-streaked phone booth on a deserted street corner. The man, his features obscured by shadow, fed a handful of coins into the slot. He dialed, waited, and then spoke in a low, clipped tone. The internal audit is a dead end. They're focused on the old code. He listened for a moment, his head nodding. Yes, the new monetization engine is ready for deployment. They'll see it as a solution, not the cause. The data is clean. They suspect nothing. He hung up, meticulously wiping his fingerprints from the receiver with a handkerchief before melting back into the wet darkness. Cheonyu found her at a small cafe near her office, a place so aggressively independent it didn't even have Wi-Fi. Shannon was hunched over a notepad, a half-empty mug of coffee at her elbow, a brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't know why he was there. Maybe to warn her off. Maybe to understand the storm she was about to unleash. Still chasing ambulances, Miss Shen? He asked, his voice smoother than he intended. She looked up, her eyes not with surprise, but with a weary fire. I'm chasing the people who caused the accidents, Mr. Chiao. She gestured to the empty chair opposite her. Sit. Unless you're afraid of what a journalist has to say, he sat. For 10 minutes, he listened as she laid out the case of Hon Xiaodong, not as an accusation, but as a tragedy. She spoke of the game's predatory mechanics with a chilling clarity that stripped away all the corporate jargon of player engagement and monetization strategy. Your company sees a PR problem, a dip in your stock price, she said, her voice low but intense, each word landing like a precision strike. I see a boy who couldn't tell the difference between a mythical creature and a concrete barrier. Your company built the fantasy that killed him. She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. Indifference is the real poison here, Mr. Chia. It's the comfortable silence in boardrooms that allows things like this to fester until they ruin lives. Cheonyu felt something shift inside him. He was used to adversaries, competitors, sycophants. He wasn't used to this. She wasn't attacking him. She was challenging him. She held up a mirror not to his company, but to his world, a world so insulated by wealth and power that a boy's life could be reduced to a data point. He looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, he saw the fierce intelligence in her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way her hands curled around her cheap ceramic mug as if it were an anchor. The sharp-edged troublemaker he had dismissed was gone. In her place was a woman of unnerving integrity, and for the first time since Song Shitao's death, Xiao Tianyu felt he wasn't entirely alone in the fight. The air in the vision conference room was thick with a familiar, suffocating doubt. Executives lined the polished mahogany table, their expressions a mixture of pity and impatience. Xiao Tianyu stood before them, a stark silhouette against the panoramic city view. The failed launch of Rome the world hung over them like a shroud, and they expected him, the prodigal son, to offer little more than a flimsy apology. Instead, he was calm. A quiet, unnerving confidence emanated from him as he clicked to the first slide of his presentation. Our problem isn't the game, he began, his voice steady, cutting through the murmurs. It's trust. We broke it, and we have to earn it back, one player at a time. He laid out a plan so audacious it bordered on madness. Not a corporate restructuring or a sterile marketing campaign, but a ground-up, community-focused revival. We're hosting a grand cosplay showcase. We'll invite top designers, streamers, and most importantly, our players. This won't be a vision event. It will be their event, a celebration of the world we built together. He paused, letting the idea settle. Phase 2. We recruit 100 legacy players, our most dedicated, most critical fans. We give them direct access to our development team, pay them for their time, and implement their feedback in real time. We will be radically transparent. A senior vice president scoffed. You want to let fans dictate our development cycle? It's inefficient, chaotic, it's honest, Cheonyu countered, his gaze sweeping across the room and landing on his sister, Chia Lisa. We tried the corporate way. It gave us a polished, soulless product that failed. Now, we try my way. We give the game back its heart. Lisa watched him, a usual armor of cool professionalism momentarily forgotten. This was not the brother who hid from responsibility, the charming playboy who treated Vision like a personal arcade. This was a strategist, a leader who understood not just code, but people. A flicker of surprised respect, Something she hadn't felt for him in years warmed her chest. For the first time, she saw the man their father had always hoped he would become. Later that afternoon, the clink of ceramic and the low hum of conversation filled a sun-drenched cafe. Shannon stirred her latte, watching Cheonyu across the small table. He had recounted the meeting with a self-deprecating humor that couldn't quite mask his pride. "So the prodigal son finally takes the throne," she teased gently. He leaned back, a thoughtful expression replacing his smile. "It's not the throne. It's just a different kind of cage. You talk a lot about freedom, about chasing the truth, but I think everyone has their fetters. Fetters aren't always a bad thing," she countered, her gaze direct. "Sometimes they're principles, responsibilities, the things that keep you grounded. My fetters have always been my family name, this company. I spent years trying to break free from them," he admitted, his voice lowering. "I thought freedom was having no obligations, but standing in that room today, making my own decisions to save something my father built that felt more like freedom than anything I've ever known." Shannon saw him then, truly saw him. The layers of arrogance and wealth peeled back to reveal a man wrestling with legacy and purpose. His intelligence wasn't just in creating virtual worlds. It was in his burgeoning understanding of the real one. A current of deep, unexpected respect flowed through her. They came from opposite ends of the universe. Yet here, in this quiet moment, their values felt startlingly aligned. The connection between them was no longer just a spark of attraction. It was solidifying into something deeper, something built on mutual admiration. That evening, buoyed by a new sense of purpose, Cheonyu walked into his father's study. The room was a monument to power, filled with dark wood, leather-bound books, and the faint, oppressive scent of cigar smoke. Chiao Kishan sat in a high-backed armchair, his injured leg propped on an ottoman, his face a mask of stern disapproval. "I heard about your circus act at the board meeting," his father began, his voice a low rumble. "While you play games, I'm securing your future. The Lins have agreed to move forward. You will marry Susan next month." The Cheonyu of a week ago would have bristled, argued, or stormed out. The man standing there now was different. "I won't be marrying Susan," he said, his tone even and final. "Or anyone else you choose for me." Chiao Kishan's eyes narrowed. "Do not be a fool. This is about securing our company, our family." "No," Cheonyu replied, stepping closer. "It's about selling me off to patch a hole in a sinking ship. I need a partner, father. Not a business contract. Someone I feel something for." He offered a wry, defiant smile. "If you're so desperate for me to have an affectional object, then I'll just have to tell everyone I'm in love with Ma Young." The sheer absurdity of the statement left his father speechless. Before he could recover, Cheonyu's expression hardened. "You need to stop listening to Zhou Yanli. He's been advising you to sell Officen's core assets, hasn't he? He's positioning his own people to take over, and you do." The blood drained from Chiao Kishan's face. He had thought his son oblivious, lost in his virtual fantasies. But he had been listening. He had been watching. "This company is your life's work," Cheonyu continued, his voice now ringing with a passion that stunned his father. "And you will not let it crumble, just like you won't let that injury keep you down. You're going to walk again, and you're going to see vision thrive. I will make sure of it." It was a declaration, a promise. For the first time, Chiao Kishan looked at his son and saw not a disappointment, but a successor. He saw a reflection of his own fire, a defiance he thought had been bred out of Cheonyu long ago. A slow, profound shift occurred in the tense silence of the room. The weight of the empire, which Chiao Kishan had carried alone for so long, began to feel a little lighter. "Fine," the old man finally rasped, his gaze sharp and calculating. "You want to prove yourself? The Roam the World recovery project is yours. All of it. Don't come crying to me when you fail." It wasn't a blessing, but it was an opportunity. As Tianyu left the study, a heavy cloak of being the heir felt less like a burden and more like a mantle he was finally choosing to wear. He was no longer a puppet, no longer a figurehead. A fierce, exhilarating sense of control surged through him. He was forging his own path, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly, breathtakingly free. The fluorescent lights of the police station interrogation room hummed, casting a sterile, unforgiving glow on the crumpled documents Shannon spread across the metal table. Across from her, the woman who had accused Han Xiaodong of blackmail sat with a wilting smirk, her confidence eroding with every piece of evidence Shannon presented. "This is a timestamp audio file," Shannon said, her voice calm and level, cutting through the tension. She pressed play on her phone. The accuser's voice, sharp and demanding, filled the small room, explicitly laying out her terms for dropping the false assault charges. The final piece was a bank transfer record, showing a payment from a competitor of Han Xiaodong's small studio into the woman's account just 2 days before the accusation was made. The woman's face fell, the last vestiges of her arrogance dissolving into pale fear. It was over. Outside, in the chaotic lobby, Han Xiaodong's parents clung to Shannon's hands, their faces wet with tears.